She dropped her champagne glass right there, right in the middle of the chapel hallway in front of everyone. The stem slipped from her perfectly polished fingers, the glass exploded on the hardwood like a shot in the silence, sending golden bubbles and jagged crystal slivers skittering across the floor. Her lips parted slightly. Her eyes locked onto mine, stunned wide like someone had pulled the air straight from her lungs. For once, Vanessa, my stepmother, the woman always ready with a sharp remark or a syrupy deflection, had nothing at all to say. But to understand why that sound, that glass hitting the ground, felt like justice ringing through the chapel, I have to take you back a few hours earlier. She had been smiling then. Smiling. Not in sorrow or sympathy, but like someone posing for a camera. Vanessa Whitman stood at the edge of my father's grave, in a dress so white it practically glowed in the morning sun, silk flowing like water, her neckline glittering with diamonds that caught the light like tiny cold weapons. It was my dad's funeral, and there she was, sipping champagne, yes, actual champagne, as if she'd just come from a gala and not from burying her husband. She moved through the crowd of mourners like she was greeting fans, not grieving with family. She acted like she owned the place. To be fair, she probably thought she did. I stood beside the casket, stiff as a statue, my fists clenched so tightly that my knuckles turned ghost white. The air was thick with polished wood roses and something far less honest. It clung to the back of my throat like dust, like disappointment. People passed by, friends, neighbors, old colleagues offering soft hugs and murmured condolences that sounded like distant waves. I couldn't even hear the words. I saw their lips move, their brows furrowed in sympathy, but it was all background noise. I was Richard Whitman's only child, his only son, and yet I felt like an intruder in my own father's goodbye. Vanessa, younger than my father by decades and only a few years older than me, floated through the crowd like she was accepting condolences for some distant celebrity, not the man who had once held me through nightmares and taught me how to fish. She was poised, too perfect, not a single hair out of place. Her smile never faltered. Her movements were too smooth, rehearsed. I caught sight of Uncle Mark across the crowd, a tall, graying man in a dark suit that didn't quite hide the tension in his shoulders. His jaw was tight, his lips pressed together like he was holding back something he didn't understand yet. He didn't know what I had found. Not yet. Vanessa made her way to me finally. She stopped, offering a delicate tilt of her head, one of those soft practice gestures designed to make you feel like she was feeling something, anything. Her perfume hit me before her voice did. Too sweet, too sharp, like wilting lilies left too long in a vase. "I'm sorry, Jake," she said softly, placing a cold hand on my arm. "I know this must be difficult." I could barely nod. My throat had tightened like a vice, and I knew if I tried to speak, I'd choke on my own grief or rage. She leaned in just a little closer. Her voice was low, intimate, like she was trying to comfort me. But the words stung. "Your father adored you, Jake. But he wanted to take care of me, too." Her smile widened, too wide, too white. It was like she couldn't help herself. Like this was some final scene in a drama she'd directed herself. I looked back at her, but said nothing. From the outside, it probably looked like I was breaking, emotionally collapsing under the weight of it all. In truth, I was breaking, but not from the will. Not yet. What shattered me was how far away my dad had felt from me in his final year, like I had lost him before I'd actually lost him. The man I remembered, the awkward, kind, clumsy guy who burned pancakes every Saturday morning and yelled too loud at Little League games, he'd started to disappear the moment Vanessa entered our lives. At first she'd been sweetness itself, all charm, grace-light laughter, until the mask slipped, and now she stood beside his casket like a leading lady in a show that no one else had auditioned for. She had the starring role, and the rest of us, we were just her stage props. When the service ended, a man in a dark gray suit approached the front and cleared his throat. He asked immediate family to gather in the side room for the reading of the will. It was a quiet space tucked into the chapel's old wing, small, dimly lit dust dancing in the rays of colored sunlight that filtered through stained glass windows. Wooden chairs creaked beneath every shift. The air smelled like old hymnals and forgotten secrets. I took a seat in the second row. Vanessa, of course, took the front, still holding that champagne flute like a badge of honor. Her legs crossed one over the other, heels pointed. She looked like she was waiting to hear she'd won something. And in her mind she had. Ms. Evelyn Carter, our family lawyer, walked in holding a slim leather folder. Her face was unreadable, her steps slow and deliberate. She cleared her throat and began reading. Line by line, she confirmed what Vanessa had no doubt already known. The house, the land, my father's savings. Even the lake cabin we'd built together with our bare hands the summer I turned 12. All of it, every last thing gone, given to her. I stared down at the scuffed wooden floor, my heart a furnace behind my ribs. I didn't cry. I didn't move. My pulse beat in my ears like war drums. Vanessa turned her head slightly, just enough so I could see the edge of her smug smile. Then she whispered, soft and condescending, "You'll understand one day, sweetie." But my flawless, icy stepmother, with her surgically refined poise and smile like a polished dagger, had no idea what I had found just 2 nights before. Tucked beneath a loose floorboard in the attic, hidden inside a dented tin box that smelled of old varnish and secrets, was a plain, yellowed envelope. On it, in the unmistakable slant of my father's handwriting, was my name. Just Jake. No love, no greeting, just the kind of unadorned label a man gives something too important for decoration. Inside was the truth, the real will. And when I reached into my jacket that day at the chapel and pulled it free like a magician revealing his final card, Vanessa's champagne glass slipped from her fingers and shattered at her feet. I didn't flinch. Before Vanessa, it had just been Dad and me. Imperfect, sometimes, awkward, but real. After my mom died suddenly, heartbreakingly, when I was 16, we hadn't talked about our grief much. Instead, we'd clung to each other in the quiet way 2 people do when words are insufficient. We had developed a rhythm, a kind of silent agreement that we would keep moving forward. My dad was a terrible cook, constantly burning toast and forgetting timers, but I did the laundry. We made it work. We fixed what broke, even if we didn't know how. Our love didn't come with grand gestures or flowery speeches, it was in the routines, the reliability. He never missed a birthday. He sat through every one of my games, even when I was just warming the bench. We had our own language, inside jokes, strange habits. We were bonded by grief, and in that sadness, we found something sacred. That's what made it unbearable to watch it all slip away. It didn't happen overnight. It crept in slow and subtle like a draft under a door. One weekend I came home from college and everything felt different. The air in the house smelled of imported candles, soft and expensive, and something floral and sharp perfume that didn't belong to either of us. The kitchen, once cluttered and familiar, gleamed like a showroom. My dad was humming to himself as he scrubbed a pan, cheeks slightly flushed like a schoolboy nursing a crush. "She's something special, Jake," he'd said, his voice carrying that hopeful edge I hadn't heard in years. "Her name's Vanessa. We met at a charity auction. She makes me feel alive again." I managed a polite smile, but inside, something twisted. That first dinner, the first time I met her, I swear the temperature in the room dropped 5 degrees. Vanessa was beautiful in that high-gloss art gallery sort of way. Flawless skin salon, perfect hair designer, everything. Her eyes flicked over me like I was an oversight in the evening's guest list. "Oh," she said with a practiced blink of surprise. "You didn't mention your son was so grown." Her voice was warm, sticky sweet, but cold underneath like syrup poured over ice. I told myself to breathe, to give her a chance. For Dad's sake, I smiled through it. I came home for holidays, sat through elaborate dinners I wasn't asked to help prepare, nodded through stories of gala events and trips I hadn't been invited on. I laughed when she did, even when her jokes were at my expense. But each visit chipped something away. Dad started dressing better, switched colognes, talked about selling the lake cabin, the same place where we'd scattered my mom's ashes, where we'd built a dock with our bare hands, nails, crooked skins, sunburned and laughing. "Too much upkeep," he said. "Too many bugs," Vanessa added. I told myself it was love, that maybe he deserved happiness even if it was wrapped in silk and diamond rings. I told myself he'd come back to center. But over time, the man I knew blurred. Calls turned into rushed voicemails. Voicemails became silence. I began to doubt myself. Was I clinging too hard? Was I just unwilling to share him? But deep in my gut, I knew better. Vanessa didn't stumble into our lives. She walked in with purpose and precision, like someone casing a house before buying it. She had plans. And my dad, once steady and stubborn, had become pliable under her touch, a man led by affection he thought he'd lost forever. She knew exactly what she was doing. And he didn't see it. Or maybe he didn't want to. The last time I saw him alive, he hugged me at the door. It was shorter than usual, less warm. "I'm proud of you, you know," that he said, his eyes darting toward the living room where Vanessa was rearranging books on a shelf that didn't need rearranging. "Yeah," I said, forcing a smile, "I know." But I didn't. Not really. Because 3 weeks later, my phone rang. Uncle Mark's number. His voice cracked. Heart attack. Sudden. Gone before the ambulance arrived. The world just stopped. I remember sitting on the edge of my bed staring at the wall while a deep, pulsing ache settled in my chest. I didn't cry at first. I couldn't. I just sat there, caught in the hum of grief's first numbness. The next day, Vanessa called. Her tone was soft, too soft. "Jake, I just wanted to let you know. Everything's taken care of. The house, the accounts. He left it all in order." I could barely respond. I didn't ask for details. Not yet. But something in her voice, it wasn't sorrow. It was satisfaction, the kind of quiet, smug confidence of someone who'd already counted the spoils. That was the moment the fog started to lift. That was when I knew I was about to lose more than just my father. I was about to lose everything we'd built. And grief numbs, dulls the edges of reality until betrayal slices through like a knife, jagged and unforgiving. I thought the funeral would be the worst of it. Standing beside that casket, trying not to picture his last moments, trying not to wonder if he had thought of me before the end. If he knew I was still waiting for him to come back to the version of himself I remembered. But I was wrong. The funeral was only the beginning. The real gut punch came in the side room of the chapel, paneled walls, heavy curtains, chairs that creaked beneath every weight of sorrow. It smelled of old wood, lemon oil, and secrets. About a dozen people gathered: Uncle Mark, Ms. Evelyn Carter, a few distant cousins, family friends. And of course, Vanessa front and center, like a widow in a soap opera. She wore a black dress that fit like it was tailored for the occasion, diamond necklace sparkling each time she moved. Her lipstick was flawless, not a single tear in sight. In her hand, as always, a fresh flute of champagne. She looked like she was preparing for a press conference, not burying her husband. She looked back at me once. That smile, cool, controlled, triumphant. Ms. Carter stepped forward, opened her folder, and began. Her voice was measured, firm, but each sentence felt like a blow to the chest. "To my beloved wife, Vanessa Whitman," my stomach sank. "I leave the house." The words blurred. The lake property? I couldn't look up. All investment and retirement accounts. I clenched my jaw, my pulse thundered in my ears, as well as my personal belongings, and all remaining assets, with the intent that she carry forward the legacy of our home. There was no mention of me, not a single word. I might as well have been a stranger. People glanced my way, some confused, others sympathetic. Uncle Mark looked as stunned as I felt. I sat motionless, fists digging into my thighs, the weight of shame and rage crawling over my skin. I wasn't just grieving. I was being erased. And then Vanessa turned her head just slightly, just enough so her voice would slice through the hush like a whisper knife. "You'll understand one day, sweetie," she said with that same poisonous smile, the kind you use when you want the world to believe you're kind, generous, noble, even as you twist the blade deeper. And for a brief moment, I felt like maybe she'd won. Maybe I really was just some bitter kid clinging to an inheritance that was never mine. But what no one knew, what Vanessa could never have predicted, was that 2 nights before, while the house still wore the echo of my father's absence, I had climbed the attic stairs, searching for something, anything that felt like him. There, in the dim light and the scent of pine and dust, I'd found an envelope. My name on it, inside a letter, a will, the real one. And it said everything she held in her hands was meant to be mine. I hadn't told a soul, not yet, because I was waiting for this moment, this very room, this very silence, and I wanted her to hear every single word. It was 2 days after my father died. The house once filled with his voice, his clumsy footsteps, and the hum of an old jazz record spinning on the turntable, now sat in eerie, breathless stillness. It wasn't just the absence of noise. It was the kind of silence that pulsed against your skin, thick and electric, humming, with all the words left unsaid. The kind of silence that settled into your bones and made even the floorboards creak like a memory. I had stayed the night partly out of duty, partly out of stubbornness. Vanessa had told me, ever so gracefully, that she needed space and that I should take as much time as I needed. A generous sentiment if you ignored the fact that she'd already changed the locks on the side doors and had the living room redecorated with sleek minimalist furniture that looked like it belonged in a gallery and not in the house where I'd grown up building pillow forts. I couldn't sleep. The sheets still smelled like him-faint cologne and cedar and the quiet safety of childhood. So I wandered barefoot through the halls that had raised me. Eventually my steps led me upward to the attic, my dad's space. The moment I opened the creaky door, the scent hit me: dust, old pine-aged paper, and something else. The subtle trace of his aftershave lingering like a ghost. The air was warm, a little too thick, and every breath felt like inhaling memory. This was where he stored the things that didn't fit anywhere else. Boxes of tax returns, rusty fishing gear, old tools he refused to throw away, and the kind of photographs people promise to organize but never do. I wasn't looking for anything in particular. Maybe a letter, maybe nothing, maybe just him. My fingers grazed the tops of several faded cardboard boxes, each one marked with labels in his neat slanted handwriting. Photos 1985-1992, W2's 2010 Christmas lights. Then, near the back, tucked beneath a paint-stained tarp inside a cracked wooden toolbox, I saw it. A plain envelope, yellowed at the edges, slightly curled with time, and my name Jake written across the front in pen that had faded just enough to betray its age, but not enough to dull the familiarity of my father's hand. No greeting, no flourish, just my name like it had always belonged to me. My fingers trembled as I held it. My chest thudded with a rhythm I hadn't felt since I was a boy afraid of thunder. The envelope crinkled beneath my grip, but the seal was still intact. I sat down right there on the wooden floorboards and opened it slowly, like I was disarming something sacred. Inside were 2 pieces of paper, a letter, and a legal document. I unfolded the letter first. His handwriting was shaky, rushed perhaps, but it was undeniably his. The loops of the Y's the way he always dotted his I's, too low. Jake, if you're reading this, then something went wrong. I've been trying to rewrite the new will, but things got complicated. I let someone into our lives who didn't have your best interests at heart. I know it. I see it now. I'm sorry I lost sight of what really matters. This house, this land, that cabin, we built them together. You and me. They're yours. They always were. I know Vanessa won't like this, but I need you to understand this is what I want. Don't let her take that from you. I stared at the page, eyes burning, but no tears came. I think I was too stunned, too anchored in disbelief. My breath was caught somewhere between heartbreak and vindication. He knew. My father had known what Vanessa was. He'd seen it maybe too late, but he'd seen it. She didn't care about legacy. She didn't care about family. She certainly didn't care about me. But he did. He had. And even if he couldn't say it while he was alive, he'd found a way to say it here in ink and language that couldn't be erased. I unfolded the will next. It was dated over a year ago, before Vanessa had stepped into our lives in her Louboutin heels and pristine pearls. This document named me Jacob Whitman as the sole heir. Everything. The house, the savings, the lake property, even that damn old pickup truck he swore he'd never part with. It was all meant for me. I gripped the paper like it might vanish if I looked away. I felt 1,000 things at once: grief, anger, relief, love, guilt. He had tried. In his quiet, stubborn way, my father had tried to make it right. And then I felt something else. Focus. A cold-cutting clarity. I didn't shout. I didn't confront Vanessa. I didn't post about it. Didn't rage. I scanned the documents. Then the next morning, I called Ms. Evelyn Carter and calmly asked her to verify the legal standing of what I'd found. She reviewed the paperwork twice and then said in her gentle, measured voice, "Jake, this is the most recent and legally binding will. If you want to contest the one Vanessa submitted, you'll win." I was quiet for a long time. "No," I said at last. "Not yet. Let her read the fake one first. Let her smile. Let her sip her champagne and feel like she's already won." I wanted the truth to speak for itself. The day of the will reading was like stepping into a dream I'd watched on repeat in my mind. Everything moved in slow motion. My limbs felt weightless, like I was floating above it all. My hands were cold, my posture rigid, my expression neutral. Vanessa, by contrast, glowed. She sat in the front row, surrounded by my father's friends, most of whom had only met her in passing, yet now regarded her like she were the queen of mourning. She wore black lace and red lipstick. diamond earrings that glittered like frost. A fresh flute of champagne balanced in her hand like a scepter. She leaned toward Ms. Carter, whispered something, and smiled politely. Ms. Carter returned the expression, but I could see it in her eyes. She was waiting, just like I was. The room quieted. Ms. Carter opened the folder. The fake will was read. To my beloved wife, Vanessa Whitman. The words fell like stones. I leave the house, the assets, the remaining properties so that she may continue the legacy of our home. Vanessa barely blinked. She already knew what it would say. Of course she did. She likely helped him write it, or believed she had. Each word was another blade pressed to my ribs. I couldn't breathe, but I didn't flinch. Vanessa raised her glass, not in toast, just a leisurely sip, and then she looked back at me with that soft, patronizing smirk she wore like perfume. "I know this is hard, Jake," she said, projecting her voice just enough for the entire room to hear. "Your father just wanted me to be secure. You'll understand one day." And for the first time since the funeral, I smiled. "Actually," I said, my voice calm and precise as I rose to my feet, "Miss Carter hasn't finished yet. There's one more document." Every head turned. Even Vanessa's mask faltered. I reached into the inside pocket of my blazer and pulled out the envelope. Worn, weathered, real. Ms. Carter took it from me with a nod, already expecting it. She opened the will, delicately unfolding the yellowed pages, adjusting her glasses with practiced grace. "This document," she said clearly, "is dated prior to the version just read. It names Jacob Whitman as the sole beneficiary and legally overrides the subsequent version. It is by all measures the binding and valid will." The silence was absolute. No gasps, no protests. Just Vanessa, frozen mid-sip. Her hand trembled. The glass wobbled. Her lips parted, but no words formed. And then crash. The flute slipped from her hand, shattering on the chapel's hardwood floor. Gasps erupted around the room as champagne splashed across her shoes. Her chest heaved. Her eyes darted wildly, scanning the faces for anyone to come to her defense. No one did. She turned to Miss Carter, her voice trembling. "That can't be right. That's not he told me I was supposed to—" Miss Carter cut her off gently but firmly. "This is the valid will, Vanessa. There is no dispute." I didn't speak. I didn't need to. The paper she had clung to had given her everything. But the one in Miss Carter's hand had taken it all back. Vanessa looked at me, truly looked, and for the first time I saw it. Not anger, not pride. Fear. Not of me. Of powerlessness. She stood abruptly. Her heels clacked sharply as she rushed out, broken glass crunching beneath her steps. The room watched her go. A trail of silence followed in her wake. And just like that, the performance ended. I looked down at the envelope in my hands. My father's signature. His final words. His attempt, however belated, to say what he hadn't been able to in life. He hadn't forgotten me, not really. And now everyone knew it. Vanessa never spoke to me again. Of course, she contested the will, filed a claim within days. Said it was fake, forged a product of manipulation. Her lawyer tried every trick. But it didn't go far. Miss Carter had notarized copies, dates, witnesses. Everything was in order. The legal standing was ironclad. But Vanessa Whitman didn't vanish quietly into the night, as one might hope a defeated antagonist would. No, she lingered. For a full week beyond her court-mandated departure, she prowled the house like a ghost who refused to acknowledge she was already dead to it. She packed slowly, or at least pretended to, dragging out the process with designer luggage that remained curiously untouched. Her presence clung to the halls like a too-sweet perfume you can't scrub away. She called the press. She made noise. She gave interviews on front steps and in hotel lobbies, carefully lit and perfectly composed, claiming my father, Rick Whitman, community pillar, jazz-loving father, and hopeless romantic, had been manipulated. That he hadn't been in his right mind when he signed the will I held in my hands. She leaned heavily on the words coercion and mental decline, though anyone who knew my father knew he was clear-eyed and sharp until the very end. But even in her bitterness, I think a part of her knew she had lost. Not just the legal battle, but the war for memory, for legacy. She had entered our lives smiling, dripping with diamonds, a glass of champagne in her hand, and a rehearsed story of love on her lips. And now she left in silence. I remember standing by the living room window, an old one with wavy glass and a brass latch, watching as her luxury SUV rolled down the gravel drive one last time. The tires kicked up dust that swirled in the morning light like smoke. And as the car shrank into the horizon, I didn't feel victorious. I didn't even feel angry. I just felt hollow. Like the curtain had fallen on a long, painful act, and the stage was finally empty. Something enormous had ended. But in its place there was space, there was peace. Our house felt different now. It wasn't just legally mine. It felt emotionally mine again in a way that went deeper than deeds and documents. I could breathe here without feeling watched. Without wondering what had been thrown away, replaced, repainted. I started small, brewing coffee in Dad's chipped blue mug, putting on his old jazz records in the kitchen, letting the sound float through the rooms like incense. The home began to soften, to remember. And the lake cabin. The dusty, bug-ridden cabin that no one but us had ever loved, I kept that too. Of course I did. A week after Vanessa left, I drove up there alone. The porch creaked just like it used to, and the screen door still had that stubborn hinge we never quite fixed. In the living room, tucked behind a stack of old fishing magazines, I found a photograph, slightly faded edges curled. Me and Dad, covered in sawdust, sunburnt, standing side by side at the end of the dock we built together the summer I turned 12. His arm was around my shoulder. We were grinning like idiots. I placed it on the mantel. It looked right there. I didn't keep everything. I sold off a good number of assets, donated what I didn't need, let go of the things that felt like hers, the crystal vases, the silk pillows, the wine fridge she insisted on installing in the garage. I didn't want to carry forward the parts of my father's life that had been shaped by pretense and manipulation. I wanted what was real, what was ours. Uncle Mark still visits every Sunday. He brings fresh sourdough from the market and never asks questions unless I offer answers. He knows I think that I'm still unpacking more than just boxes. Some wounds don't scab over as quickly as others. Some rooms echo longer. And I talk to Dad now. Not out loud. Not in some overly sentimental way. Just in my head in the quiet moments. When I'm watering the garden, when I'm fixing a loose floorboard, when I'm out on the dock watching the sun melt into the lake. I imagine him beside me. I imagine him apologizing not for loving again, but for forgetting lost, for letting himself drift from the life we built together. I imagine him telling me he knew Vanessa would never love this place the way we did. That maybe in the end he remembered just in time. Because that envelope in the attic, it wasn't just paperwork. It wasn't just a legal correction. It was a message. It was a whispered, "I'm sorry." Sometimes people ask me if I regret not confronting Vanessa sooner, if I wish I had torn down her facade the moment I found that will, if I had let her simmer in shame for longer, let the world know the whole story in dramatic fashion. But I don't. Because what she never understood, what people like her never understand, is that real winning isn't loud. It doesn't need an audience or a toast or a final cutting remark. Real winning is quiet. It's about what remains when the storm passes, what survives. She tried to rewrite my father's story with a smile and a signature to carve herself a place into something sacred with nothing more than charm and entitlement. But stories, the real ones, they have a way of surfacing when they need to. Truth doesn't scream. It waits. It sits patiently in the background, steady, calm, sure of itself. And when it comes forward, it doesn't need to destroy. It simply lets the lies crumble under their own weight. That day taught me something I'll never forget. Not everything worth keeping can be named in a will. Not every treasure is tangible, and not everything taken can truly be owned. Some things like love, truth, legacy belong to you even when the world tries to rewrite your ending. So if you've ever been underestimated, overlooked, or watched someone walk away with what was rightfully yours, know this: I see you. I know what it's like. And I hope my story reminds you that patience isn't weakness. Sometimes it's the most powerful move of all. If this story found its way into your heart, I'd love to know. Leave a comment, share your story, or just let me know you stayed until the end. And if you felt something, if you saw a piece of yourself in this, give the video a thumbs up. Share it with someone who might need it, and don't forget to subscribe to the channel. There are more stories like this, true, emotional, and deeply personal, just waiting to be told. Because this was only one chapter, and I've got so many more to tell.